right, welcome to Wednesday. This odd day of the week, but one of the best shows on the internet, Masculine Geek. So this is Masculine Geek number 258, and we're going to be discussing miniature wargaming. But before we do that, we're going back to something we used to do years ago, Geek and Tell. I'm reviving that at this moment. So these are three AD&D hardbacks that I'm replenishing my old supply with. I had sold these three particular and a few others that I'm still searching for, but these three in particular I managed to get a hold of. My used bookstore guy knows that I'm out for. I gave him a list, and when they come in, he sets them aside for me, and they're only $25 a piece. Fantastic condition.
Good.
Oh, that's amazing. So Oriental Adventures, good condition book, almost brand new.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got slightly used, but still good condition, good spine, no spine breaks, no really, with the exception of the price tag on the inside in pencil. There's no markings on any of these books. This is the Monster Manual too.
Good.
You know, and the second iteration of deities and demigods, which wound up being the more tame Legends and Lore.
Nice Odin on the cover.
Yeah, 1985. So I'm very happy to get these. With tax, it came to like $78. These books, I think, if you go on eBay or eBooks, they're more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
But I get a bit of a discount because I am who I am. So there we go. All right, so let's get started with our focus of the evening, miniature wargaming. Now, I'll say for myself, with the exception of my brother and I playing Army Men and using rubber bands to shoot our armies back and forth after we had set them up, and playing BattleTech, my wargaming history is very limited. So we're going to really, for the most part, turn this over to Robert because I think his wargaming experience is more extensive than both TJ and I's combined. So
yeah,
well, probably a little, but also you guys play some of the aviation war games. So
oh, we did play
yeah,
Blood Red Skies is basically a miniature war game as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, obviously, I would talk a little bit about that. I mean, well, and the nice thing about Blood Red Skies, it's released by the same company that Warlord Games,
Games, yeah,
which does Black Powder, which this
yeah.
is the second edition of it. And one of the things they even talk about in the book is that it goes back to H.G. Wells as far as the basic rules.
That's the background that I've got here.
I'm gonna try and see if I have my copy.
Mine is buried. I was too lazy to bring it out, but yeah, I do have that.
Here we go. Right here. My house is my study is an organized mess. Right, it looks messy, but I know exactly where everything is. So
that's all you need to know.
And this one has a foreword by the guy who did D&D.
Oh, Gygax.
Gygax. Cool. Yep. So, I mean, obviously, there are things that are done with all war games to make them their own proprietary set of rules or system or materials. But you know, the basic concepts of you have different types of soldiers, troops, robots, what have you. They have certain strengths, they have certain weaknesses, they have certain abilities, they have certain movements. So there are certain things they can and cannot do on a battle. So when you employ them, you know, it varies if you're doing something historically where, you know, you're looking at the troops that were actually at the Battle of Waterloo versus ones that weren't, or maybe were held in reserve up in Brussels or something like that. Or if you're just doing a you know, a pickup game, staying with the Napoleonic theme, where, okay, we're going to do a battle in you know, in Portugal or Spain. not one of the historic battles, but it'll be a skirmish. We'll field units worth this many points or this strength level or whatever. So whatever your breakdown is for points for some of the robot games, it's like tonnage, so that you have something approximately equal.
Yeah.
So whether you decide to do, I'm going to field a bunch of light mechs, or I'm going to
Stingers
field
versus Shadowhawks.
or whether I'm going to have a lot of light infantry troops and just a couple of grenadier or guard units, and no cavalry, or I'm going to be heavily focused on cavalry with just a little bit of infantry support. Whatever your theme is, and you set your field of battle up, or your terrain map or what have you, and then from then on it's pretty much measurement and chance as far as dice rolls and things like that. But the actual I think it might be easier if I just read something out of the book. See if I can do it justice. Let's see. There is no piece of constructive legislation in the world, not a solitary attempt to meet a complicated problem, that we do not now regard the more charitably for all of our efforts to get the right result from this apparently easy and puerile business of fighting with 10 soldiers on a floor. H.G. Wells.
Nice.
So, and in basically the beginning of this book, it talks about black powder is a game for the militarily inclined gentlemen with straight backs, bristly beards, rheumy eyes that have seen a thing or two. If tales of battle and glory in days gone by stirred nothing in your breast, if the roar of cannons does not quicken the pulse and set a fire in your belly, then stop reading forthwith. Ours is not an adventure to be embarked upon for the faint-hearted. Put down this book and be glad that you have spared yourself the discomforting spectacle of grown men attempting to relive the great conflicts of history with armies of toy soldiers. So heft your musket and prepare for battle. The library or the billiard room will serve as our battlefield, or else some similarly spacious and secluded refuge. Ensure that the children are safely put to bed and lie safely beyond earshot. Secure the door against the intrusion of womenfolk as yet unfamiliar with the convention of war. Ready your armies for the long march to glory. And finally, let us remember that the ideal accompaniment to the journey may be found in a good brandy, a fine cigar, and the companionship of like-minded enthusiasts. Is that not more or less your manifesto for masculine geek and masculine geek life?
Absolutely. It's I could not have said it better myself. And I've just brought up here the Warlord Games website,
who are not sponsoring us, by the way.
No, they do not sponsor us, although I do have Blood Red Skies, so does TJ, and I've got the Naval War Game, which we never played when we were in Ocean City, and I blame TJ.
And I have Blood Red Sky.
Every single time to play these games. I even brought my aircraft carrier to launch my planes off of and add some more, interesting, because if you hit the aircraft carrier with the planes on it, you would have sunk it, and the planes would have gone.
Well, we both did not say anything about it, so we could blame both of ourselves. So we're both idiots.
I blame Aaron. It's Aaron's fault.
It's Aaron's fault, that retard.
Most things are, but yeah, I've got some of. Well, obviously, I've got their black powder, and they have specific eras. So I mean, if you wanted to play in like colonial America, the French and Indian War, or the American Revolution, if you wanted to play in South Africa and the Anglo-Zulu Wars, if you wanted to play in Egypt, during the various crises there and in Sudan, or obviously Napoleonic. Napoleonic is kind of the classic
That's what's fascinating is like Peter Cushing, when they did that video of him working on his gaming figures, it was Napoleonic era.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's
there's the
something
Waterloo
about that.
campaign right here.
Well,
That-
what I find fascinating about that from a
Oh, they got
Anglo-
houses now.
Yeah.
What I find
Oh, it's
fascinating
awesome.
about that from an Anglo
Villages.
perspective is that the British were never. They had a small army. They were always having to have these coalitions of different nations because the French had the main army. The British
Down
were all
south, too.
navy.
Mhm.
So I just find it interesting how that Napoleonic era is really a fact. Like it. I can't remember who said it, but they were talking about how Napoleon really left his mark on like English British like psyche, where they don't hate him the way that somebody would hate another guy, but like they just are fascinated by him.
Well, part of that is the British Army at that point in time. One of the crown princes who was in charge of the military introduced a lot of changes to modernize
Right.
the British military in terms of being
A modern military,
a
like
modern European military by the standards of the early 1800s. So you have that. Secondly, the Napoleonic campaigns, Napoleon's success in warfare throughout Europe, fighting against the Austrians, the Prussians, and obviously Spain, and then going into Portugal. His success throughout Europe, despite some mistakes and what dealing with the campaign into Russia, he was hugely successful. But
right.
Wellington was the one general to beat him. And not only did he beat Napoleon, he had defeated all of Napoleon's generals basically before defeating him. And
Right.
yes, the battle at Waterloo was not just a British victory. Had the Prussian army not arrived when it did, had there not been a gentleman's agreement between Blucher and Lord Wellington, that victory would have not have been pulled off, and it was a pretty close thing. And obviously Napoleon and his marshals made mistakes as well, but the British and the Prussians won the day, carried the day. That whole campaign through the peninsula and the successes there, and then the ultimate success at Waterloo there at the end, romanticized a lot of things for a lot of young British men who had fathers and grandfathers and uncles who had fought in the Napoleonic War. And this was true for guys who, accepted the king's shilling and went off to fight, as well as those who were, second sons of minor nobility or successful merchants who were able to afford a commission in the king's army and fought. So these guys were heavily romanticized, and so much so that even guys like Winston Churchill, had such fierce military ambitions and reverence for them. And we've talked before on this show how much of a toy soldier collector and fanatic and what an obsession that was for young Churchill in his youth.
I was thinking about how that was also it was probably the second time in British history where there was a real threat of invasion from Napoleon, from a foreign power, because the only other one really was the Spanish Armada.
Right.
And so you had this situation where there was a war going on where you were kind of fighting for your national, like literally fighting for your national survival or your identity, or being ruled by a foreign power. So for the guys who got to fight in that was a source of like patriotic pride. It wasn't just they weren't just being sent off to Sri Lanka or sent off to some random part of the world. They were pretty much fighting to keep an enemy at bay that was on their right across a channel.
Mm-hmm.
I think that probably had something to do with it. I think it was also just Napoleon was so brilliant. He was probably the best that the British ever faced in that regard. I mean, I know that they weren't able to beat our people, but that was a different situation. They weren't throwing everything they had at us.
What's up, Blake?
And Washington was, in terms of his ability to keep an army together, he was one of the best. But he wouldn't wipe out or completely destroy an army in a battle. That just wasn't his. That wasn't his strength.
Well, and also conflict in the Napoleonic era was very different than conflict in the colonial era, and obviously there are other differences as far as the war here. I mean, it's sad that the War of 1812 is kind of glossed over in this country, because it's actually hugely significant for the continued existence of this country.
Right.
The only similarities, and I've got a book on it as well, the tactics. So you've got everything with Napoleonic Wars, and then you have the colonial Revolutionary War, and then you have the Civil War. They all used French fighting techniques, and even the British. So that continued even down to the stances, the T stance of the Union soldiers to combat the recoil of their muskets. All French. So that's one similarity they continue to have throughout the ages. And that didn't change. That didn't change until World War One.
But so there's that, and there's just a huge romanticism with that. Even and I know
I think it was also the pageantry.
Well, there's still that, but I mean that doesn't really change until later, because even in the Anglo-Zulu War, the British here are there in Africa, and they're still wearing red coats. So it's after that things start to change to being more uniforms appropriate for the climate or situation of battle and warfare, as opposed to needing all the bright colors to differentiate units and troop movements and things like that.
I think they learned that after the Boer Wars.
Yeah, I've got a book that just came out recently that on the last of the British redcoats, and it's in the queue to read, and I just haven't had a chance to get around to it, because, like I said, it's fairly new. I was fortunate enough to get an autographed copy, though, from the author, who has written several other books on various aspects of the British Army. But in the TV series The Crown about Queen Elizabeth II, there is a Queen's secretary, I believe his name is Tommy Lascelles, who eventually retires from the position, and the Queen goes to visit him at his house after his retirement, because of a situation that required someone with his experience. And she goes into his drawing room or his office, and there's a table set up with I believe it's Waterloo. It may be another battle of the Peninsula campaign instead, but basically, he has the table set up with all these British and French troops and stuff, and the Queen picks up one of the toy soldiers, or one of the miniatures, and is looking at it, what a pretty little, bauble and stuff, and ask him a question about it. And, he of course knows immediately, if not who the person is, what unit it is, what their position within the military is, and so forth. It may have been an officer. It may have been a soldier carrying the king's standard. But anyway, he knows all of this, and she's like, "Oh, that's so interesting and stuff." And then she sets the piece back down on the table, and they finish their conversation, and she walks out. And of course, he follows behind her. And as he's following behind her, he grabs the piece off the table and puts it back where it belongs. Because even though she's the Queen of England, she has no clue. She just picked it up off the table. She put it back on the table. But to men of that era, and even still into the modern day, who are toy soldier enthusiasts and historic war gamers, knowing who goes where, when, and how they should be is a very big deal. And it's something they're quite passionate about, just like most men are with their hobbies. That's right. One of the great luxuries and joys in life that we have, that for the most part is, women are blissfully unaware. Not that there aren't some women that are into wargaming or D&D or anything else. There's always exceptions, as Vince and I were talking about earlier, but generally speaking, they don't do it the way we do. Yes, exactly. A game for boys.
Oh, the bottom.
Yeah.
And the more intelligent sort of girls who like boys' games and books.
Yes, exactly. And that's still true. All these years later, it is still very much true.
That's never changed.
I was gonna say, I actually interviewed a guy years ago for a story I was doing about, he was creating biking trails in a local area, but we somehow got on the topic. He was a evangelical zealot for wargaming, and he just sat there and talked. Like, we did like a 35-minute interview. The next hour was him talking about wargaming, and he talked about the level of micro details. Hey, how much supplies does this group have for like World War I? And do you have supply chain so that you got to move that up to the trenches? And if this group doesn't get their allotment of ammunition, are they basically combat ineffective and can't attack?
Right.
And you can't use them. Like all this stuff. I'm like, wow, that is a level of detail I never thought was possible. But that's stuff that some of these guys think about, where they're just very hardcore about. And I don't know how they kept track of this. This was back in 2012. But
but guys have always been able to do that. They will go to a book in their library to prove that the piping on this unit's uniform is this and this, and it didn't change until 1820 something, long after the war, and and in fact that unit didn't even exist then, because the such and such regiment of foot was merged with this other regiment to become this new regiment, and it is an obsession. Crazy. It is a passion, and it's absolutely glorious, and I love every minute of that.
Yeah.
And one of the things, if you're paying attention to what Vince is doing, some of the units with like the groups, you can buy a box of Union soldiers, but depending on how you choose to paint them, will make what unit they are within the context of the war.
Cavalry,
and some, of course, and the Iron Brigade, which would include the 19th Indiana. And units from Michigan and Pennsylvania and so forth. And then, of course, Vince was looking at Union units from New York in that area. And depending, the Zouaves, obviously, there were Zouaves from both Pennsylvania and New York, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
In fact, I have some toy soldiers of Pennsylvania troops. And while you could play war games with this scale, it's easier to buy the resin, and that's another thing that changes depending on what scale figures you've got, what the scale is on the rules, and what your measurements are going to be when moving and fighting, and also some of the dice rolling's a little bit different as well.
Yeah, the outcomes.
Yeah.
And that, yeah, I know, TJ, you were asking about movement and how it's very similar to what we used in Blood Red Skies with the ruler. Everything is done with a tape measure.
Mm-hmm.
And
Gotcha,
as
that
far
makes
as like unit representation, you could have a stand of like, see, there's like 4 guys like on one stand, or
Mm-hmm.
5 guys on one stand. That could represent a unit of 50. So when you keep track of that, it's like, all right, well, these are this one lone figure. Obviously, you can't have 1,000 figures on the board. That's not going to make sense from a space point of view. Exactly. So you have a grouping of 10 that might represent 100 soldiers. Okay, and you keep track of that one section. So when you get hit, the dice rolls are against you, and you're like, all right, well, your adversary knocked out 10 of your guys. Now you're down to 90.
Mm-hmm.
So you just make sure you keep track of that.
And also the way the bases are with some of these, you can actually remove and replace them with like casualties and stuff like that. So for example,
Correct. Yeah, like laying
if-
down.
yeah, and if your company, well, let's say your brigade is under heavy fire from cannons, you may have a company that is almost completely wiped out from that battalion or that brigade. So and then of course you'll have your skirmishers or light companies, which are batched a little bit differently and they move differently, and usually there are rules, some of them based on the performance of various units themselves. So for example, historically, the British cavalry was the best equipped during the Napoleonic Wars. Hands down, the best equipped. They also had the best horses who were in the best shape and treated really, really well. The unfortunate thing is, historically, and there's a little bit of controversy as to how bad it was, but the British cavalry had a very bad habit of kind of going off the rails in that they were not always well in control of themselves, and their enthusiasm and egos and esprit de corps oftentimes got the best of them. So, for example, at Waterloo, the famous charge of the Scots Greys and all these heavy cavalry, they charged all the way to the French lines, to the French cannons, and basically blew out their horses. So by the time the French counterattacked with their lancers and I think a group of Polish cavalry, the British horses were already spent. So it was a fight for their life getting back to the British lines. Whereas had they just successfully charged, broke up the army, slaughtered those French infantrymen and moved back so that the cannons could re-engage from the British side, it would have been a far more successful attack, and there would still be plenty of British cavalry to continue to operate later on in the battle. And that's not the case. And so guys like Ponsonby and other commanders and officers lost their lives at Waterloo. The French cavalry, which had trouble taking care of their horses as far as having feed and stuff for them, rode them too much and not that they didn't take good care of them, but they did not rest them enough, they did not groom them enough, and they did not feed them enough. But despite that, the French cavalry troopers were much more professional, much more in control. So when you're sitting there doing stats for these units and stuff, it's like, okay, here are the pluses for the British cavalry, here are the pluses for the French, here are the minuses for the British, here are the minuses for the French. So a smart wargamer who knows this will play with that to use their strengths and weakness, to be mindful of their weaknesses and use their strengths. Units that have great esprit de corps maybe have a better movement rate, or maybe they have a better ability in battle or something like that. and other times they don't. For example, if TJ is fielding a group of French light infantry, voltigeurs, right, skirmishers, and I am, of course, deploying my King's German Legion riflemen and my 95th riflemen, my British lights, I have a significant advantage over them in accuracy. I can hit TJ's voltigeurs at a longer rate, and I have a better chance of hitting them. However, my load rate for my rifles is not as quick as TJ's load rate for his muskets, because the French voltigeurs are not using rifled muskets. They are using French muskets, smooth bore, no rifling. So TJ can load more rounds per engagement than I can, but I'm more accurate and I can hit his troops at a longer rate. So now it's purely up to the dice and how TJ and I field our troops and what we do with it as to who will win. But TJ has some advantages and some weaknesses. I have some advantages and weaknesses. And that's all part of the stuff that's figured into the game. Now, obviously, this book is much thicker than what TJ's has. But it's essentially the same kind of thing. But like I said, there are certain proprietary things that have been updated, and also our knowledge of what happened in the Peninsula Wars, in the Anglo-Zulu Wars, in the war in the Sudan, in the French and Indian War, whatever. There are a lot more books, a lot more research, a lot more primary sources that have been delved into academically, both for good and otherwise, than at the time Wells would have written his book. So, and that's just kind of the nature of it. But generally speaking, whatever rules we would be using, you know, it's pretty much the same thing. And essentially any games like Blood Red Skies, BattleTech, or Mech Warrior, Starfleet Battles, they all may have their different rules for their different universes, for whether you're fighting with big giant stompy robots, World War II aircraft, tanks, starships, what have you, even Star Frontiers, Nighthawks. They're all still essentially war games, whether you're fighting battles in outer space with spaceships or whether you're fighting with French and British troops. Now, you guys play Blood Red Skies a lot more than I do, so if you guys want to talk a little bit about that and how that's a little different. I've got the game. I've got some of the ace pilots even, which is cool. I like having the fact that they changed their stats.
We met up in Kansas City. For meetup to play and then meet Quintus Curtius. So it's basically a World War II dogfighting game, essentially. Mm-hmm. So I don't have the pieces near me, which I should have actually, which is short-sighted of me, but that's fun. That's fun. But it's basically uses similar rules as far as like each squadron of plane will have certain power levels and armor level ratings and attack ratings, and you use those when you're determining whether or not you've actually hit your adversary when you roll a certain amount of dice.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's either 4 or 6 dice that are rolled, and depending upon your opponent who rolls the same amount of dice, the offset, the difference between the two will determine the outcome of the fight.
Mm-hmm. So obviously, say TJ's flying Imperial Japanese Navy Zeros.
I was playing those.
Oh, okay. Vince
TJ
is flying
was
the
American.
Japanese Zero.
Yeah, I was playing the slopes.
Okay. So your planes, might maybe a little bit quicker, have maybe better turn capacities or whatever, but they're not nearly as heavily armored as
they're not. No, exactly. They have like TJ's. So. Yeah, TJ's. Maybe his Mustangs or Corsairs may have an armor rating of 5, mm-hmm. and my Mustangs, the Mitsubishi Zeros, would have an armor rating of 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
But they're faster.
Yeah.
So that it all balances out, and you roll different dice based upon those differences.
Right. And whether TJ's flying Wildcats, Hellcats, Mustangs, Corsairs,
Yep.
they're all American planes, but they all have very different stats as far as how well they handle armor and speed.
Their armor and their how they're constructed as far as like their ability with airspeed. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm gonna play this for you guys because this is the a quick reenactment of the Battle of Trenton, which is I work in Trenton, so I know all this stuff and I can walk down and see it, which is kind of cool. When you live on the East Coast in New Jersey, you're immersed in this this history, which I love, which is probably one of the few things keeping me here.
Mhm.
So let me go over here and share this down. Can you see that?
Yeah.
All right. Can you hear that?
Yes.
All right, good.
Take your aim! Fire! Right! Fire!
What's with the rainbow crosswalk? Gay.
Mm-hmm.
I walk past that on my way to lunch sometimes.
Wow.
Yeah. By the barracks.
Whenever I'm looking through one of my toy soldier catalogs or at a hobby shop buying something new, whenever I come across predominantly New York and New Jersey troops, whether they're from the colonial time period or the Civil War, I always think of you, Vince. I always think, how do I get this sucker and send it to Vince?
Absolutely. Feel free, yes.
But yeah, well, one of the other things I always
13th
thought,
Regiment.
yeah, growing up here in
New Jersey.
Indiana and living in the Midwest and traveling out west and even down south, it's always interesting for me whenever I'm in New England, especially out in the country, and you drive by some of those old family farms and you see the date on the family farm on the barn, and I'm like, wow, that's older than my state.
Oh yeah, I've been reading about the Battle of Gloucester, which is not too far from me, and like they buried some of the British soldiers like right there. I often wonder if they ever went back to ship them back, or are they still under somebody's farmland, or like you know, like their body's still there where they fell and were buried with all their equipment.
I would not be surprised if it's the latter.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, outside of, I mean, this was the wilderness. So any of the skirmishing and stuff here was mostly with, you know, American irregular troops and the various native tribes that were fighting or allied to the Brits. So as far as like, you know, George Rogers Clark and Fort Vincennes and stuff like that. And then of course a little bit later you get Mad Anthony Wayne and the First American Legion and stuff, which is a set that was recently released toy soldier wise by W. Britton's. And I'm very glad I have that complete set thus far. Because I primarily am a Napoleonic collector. And because that is really, when it comes to toy soldiers, that is like the classic gentleman's hobby as far as the toy soldier and miniature wargaming. That stereotype of older men, beard, gray hair, drinking a cognac or a brandy or a bourbon or a single malt scotch, smoking a cigar around a billiard table lined with troops and stuff. There's a reason that stereotype exists, and it still definitely resonates. And I was just naturally attracted to it. And also, I think it's a little bit easier for me to be impartial with the Napoleonic stuff as opposed to the Revolutionary War and obviously the American Civil War. The English Civil War is interesting, but the American Civil War, I've just a little too personal. I had genuine feelings one way or another about right and wrong and good and bad and so on and so forth. And of course, it's not necessarily black and white in that regard. It's just, there are lots of things about the Civil War that should have never happened, but
right.
Yeah.
I was reading about that era. I was reading about just what was going on. And it's just one of the frustrating part for me was how a lot of the guys who were shit talking never actually went into any of the fighting. It was always these kind of guys trying to walk the line. I don't know, because you look at the way it ended and the way that some of the main leaders were. These guys were friends. They didn't hate each other, but you had people in the South and people in the North who were all calling for war. But did any of these abolitionists, not all of them, I know some of them did, but did any of these fire breathers go? Did any of these guys who were all talking?
They were the typical Democratic libtards of today. That hasn't changed.
Yeah, they send a bunch of somebody else goes and does. Yeah, somebody else goes and dies for their cause, and it's just
here you go. Here's Washington Crossing. I was actually there this weekend.
Nice.
Yeah, here you go.
Hey, we're Americans. We'll come to kill you in your sleep.
Absolutely.
On
Christmas Eve.
His
Right?
family have spent part of Christmas Day watching George Washington and his troops make their daring cross.
This is fun to go to. I've been there several times.
We are very fortunate to live close to something where the epicenter of where everything has started, where Washington made his initial progress in the Revolutionary War.
The event's taken place at Washington Crossing State Park for the past 69 years. And like years past, this year, thousands gathered on the bridge and along the riverbed to watch reenactors recreate the Christmas night crossing of 1776.
This is our only chance to make this army viable again. I think we need one victory, and we believe that the victory is going to be this one crossing, march to Trenton, and a surprise attack on the Hessian outpost.
As we know now, the crossing was victorious and considered a turning point in the Revolutionary War.
This is very full of information that I didn't know about, and it is a good learning experience.
These parents from Morrisville say their kids have never experienced a reenactment and thought this Christmas was the perfect opportunity to show them some history.
I think it's a lot of good information of history that these guys can learn. I learned a lot of it in school, but still there's information that we've learned from many of the reenactors here today that I never knew.
It's the first time the event's in person in 2 years. COVID forced it to go virtual last year, so spectators had to watch the whole thing from the comfort of their home instead of lining along the Delaware.
Heaven forbid you stand outside.
Done it in person,
right?
We're lucky
in the
to
fresh
be here
air.
Yankovic was concerned it'd be canceled again this year because of the weather and considers it a Christmas miracle. The rain held off.
We were able to come here and enjoy the show.
In Washington's Crossing, I'm Brian Sheehan, NBC 10 News.
I don't know. Washington wasn't particularly lucky when he did it for real. So
I know, right? He's like, yeah, screw it. Yeah, it's fun to see. I was there. The last time I was there was probably 2018, 2019.
Mm-hmm.
As far as like being there for the reenactment on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
Christmas
Now
Eve,
I don't
Christmas Day.
remember who had said something about how popular toy soldiers are in the UK because of the lead and 10.
That was
But
Chris Vogan.
That was it, Chris? Okay. Hey,
That's
thanks, Chris. Yeah, I guess there are a couple of different YouTube channels that like do archaeological stuff, like in the Thames River. And one of the huge things they find in the Thames along London are old toy soldiers. I mean, like tons, bucketfuls of them from, that just got lost in the river from kids either playing with them or mom getting rid of stuff, whatever. So, but yeah, that passion is probably one of the older, I mean, outside of things like, gambling and wenching and, drinking and stuff, is probably one of our oldest hobbies as far as that goes.
I mean,
and it was something that gentlemen did, because like I said, Winston Churchill did it. Obviously guys like Peter Cushing did it. Peter Cushing made his own little toy soldiers, as well as meticulously painting them to be historically accurate. So
let's see if we can find.
And that's one of the things I think some women don't understand when they talk about men objectifying them. That fine attention to detail and obsession that we have when we objectify something is, that's not a bug. That's
that the hobby speaks to the reality, and the reality is men understand the concept of loyalty and honor.
Mm-hmm.
Women do not. This is not an indictment on their character. This just is. It's an observation. They didn't need to.
No.
Their realm of fighting was behind the scenes. Their realm of fighting was in the shadows. Their realm of fighting was with gossip and poison.
Mm-hmm.
That
was
not
social.
That was not the realm of men. So anytime anyone likes to bring that up, like, well, no, sit down. Women, fundamentally, women are not interested in this thing. And if they are, it's because the men are, and they want to be closer to the men,
or a specific man. Usually,
correct.
Yeah, I'm really not interested in playing D&D, but I am interested in spending more time with Jeremy or Kevin or whomever. So, ergo, I will play D&D so I can spend Friday and Saturday night with the guy.
Here, let me share this, Peter Cushing. I think I shared it before, but this is worth a repeat. Then we'll call it a night.
The late, great Peter Cushing.
Correct. Let me fire that up.
From an ever-growing family of dogs to an ever-growing army of toy soldiers at the Kensington home of film actor Peter Cushing. For in his spare time, Peter, an enthusiastic member of the Model Soldier Society, collects, makes, and acts as general to an army over 5,000 strong. These troops, from every period of military history, are the result of meticulous research into uniforms and military techniques. Cushing often links hobby and film career, portraying military leaders in films like The Black Knight and Alexander the Great, and then creating in miniature the armies of these historical characters. Many of these tiny replicas are made from compressed drawing paper, delicately hand-painted, and with detachable swords and helmets. But surrounded by these miniature masterpieces, Cushing is not content to just sit and admire them. He plays with them. He plays with them solemnly and conscientiously, according to the rules laid down by H.G. Wells in his famous book, Little Wars. The title is described as a game for boys from 12 to 150, and for that more intelligent sort of girl who likes boys' games and books. In fact, the game has been and is played most soberly by distinguished people. It's said that Napoleon was an enthusiast. Played rather like a game of chess, but more exciting, the battle area is first laid out to the player's specifications. And then, in turn, artillery, cavalry, and infantry clash, or take evasive action according to the player's generalship and spirit. Altogether, a fascinating test of ingenuity and, more important, good marksmanship by the gunners firing their toy shells, proving, if we needed proof, that playing soldiers is one...
I love how he starts smoking a cigarette.
Yeah.
That's my favorite part.
Right? Before the smoking ban.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even in this book here, and what I'd read at the top of the hour at the beginning of the show, it was talking about having the proper accessories for this hobby and pastime is a drink and a cigar, and obviously a good group of friends. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we'll be recreating that same aesthetic when we meet up for the MG live stream, the AD&D game in this spring/summer. So.
Yep.
Be cool. I'm gonna get started on that. I'm gonna find out exactly the dates from Rollo.
Yeah.
I want to get that locked down. I don't want any kind of flaking or ridiculous crap from any of these guys. It's like if you say you're gonna do it, show the fuck up.
When was the last time we played Drew's Viking game?
Well, Drew keeps getting sick and getting new exercise equipment. So who the fuck knows?
Yeah. How is a guy that buff that perpetually ill?
He's what, TJ?
I was gonna say that, but I was like, maybe I shouldn't say that. And then Robert's like, "Oh, well, I'll say it."
we even said to his face, he's like, "I don't know, man."
Well, I'm just like, it's crazy how the whole physical fitness thing and your fitness, but I think that actually has more to do with how many people you have around you. I live by myself. I don't get sick, but when I'm around people, like when I'm in,
you're only touching your own genitalia.
Yeah. Well, not that kind of sick, you retard.
Well, and Drew a lot of times ends up getting some kind of weird stomach bug from something.
It's a stomach thing. He ate something weird. He's puking for 5 days.
And it's like, my God, what beyond your protein shake and steak? What the hell are you eating, Drew?
I don't know. We haven't played his game in almost 2 months now.
Yeah, it's like whoever she is, stop eating her. I mean,
right? lay off the seafood.
Man.
Lay off the seafood. See.
But no, and I mean, I really enjoy. I invested in a miniature.
I know,
from our Viking game because that's
Absolutely. No. I'm gonna reach out to him probably the end of the month. I'll give him another month to get settled. Then we'll go from there. But,
and then we've got Rollo's game coming up on the 21st.
The 21st. Yeah, that's with AJ again.
Okay.
He's very appreciative and really likes the game so far.
Yeah, I don't know if AJ's watching. If so, it's fun gaming with you. In fact, Vince, don't you have something going on with AJ coming up?
I do. I have an interview with him to talk about Masculine Geek and all things related, and I guess the history and all the background next Thursday.
Next Thursday.
I think it's 8. I'll double check and I'll post something probably on Instagram and on the community tab on YouTube. But I think it's at 8:30 p.m. Eastern.
Okay. Not tomorrow, but a week from tomorrow.
A week from tomorrow, yes. Whatever. Okay. What's that? The 15th?
Yeah, I believe so.
That's the 15th. Yeah, and next week we have VD. Next week is VD. VD Day. And we'll have we'll just have a general hangout between the three of us. To be just, talk about that. About anything we want. I don't have anything planned or scheduled. 21st will be Rollo's game. I do want to I've been talking with Brian Bowden, the paranormal guy and the cryptozoologist dude. We're going to have him back on both the Masculine Geek Life private Zoom hangouts for the Masculine Geek Life members, and then we're going to have him back on for the regular broadcast. Probably not on a Wednesday because Wednesday he does another show.
Right.
that would just overlap.
Mhm.
So we'll probably do something like a rogue broadcast that makes sense for all of us.
Like on a Friday evening or Saturday afternoon or something like
well,
that.
I would say a Friday evening because that would probably accommodate all three of us and Brian as well.
Okay.
And we'll keep that, around an hour and a half. He just has such good energy. He's a really good guest. So, and the topic is phenomenally fascinating.
Mm-hmm. No matter what your opinion is on it, it's interesting.
It's so interesting. It's so much fun to talk with Brian. He was I had text messaged him a couple days ago. He's actually in New York, visiting some friends and family, and doing some other things, paranormal related. So he'll be heading back to Florida on Friday or this Saturday.
Right.
So we'll get something for later in February.
All right.
So that'll be fun.
If you guys are watching us or are interested in toy soldiers or some of the gaming stuff, Vince and I have been talking about me reaching out to some of the people I know in those different industries about having them come on as a guest. So if you guys are interested, let us know in the chat. That way we can, obviously we're going to get guests we want to talk to, but if there's something you guys are interested in that fits in with what we're interested in, we'll gladly try and get some of those people to come on and hang out with us for a little while.
Oh yeah, some of you gentlemen in the chat who are longtime followers and chatters, and we know you. If you have an idea for a show, feel free to email me at masculinegeek@gmail.com or drop it in the comment section of any YouTube channel, preferably the latest one, so I see it. Mm-hmm. But like I said, you can head over to your email account and send an email to masculinegeek@gmail.com and give me an idea for a show.
Yeah.
So we're always welcome comments, thoughts, and words of wisdom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But, so if you enjoyed the cigar show we had with the leaf cutters, I did.
Oh, that was fun. That was fun. Yeah, that got some good views too.
Yeah, that was fun.
We're having them back on. So I was talking with Andy and Gibbs. We're gonna have them back on in March when it's warmer.
Yeah,
like towards the tail end of March, so we can sit outside if we can.
Mm-hmm.
I can sit out on my balcony. If TJ wants to sit outside, that's fine. Or you, Robert, that's fine.
Yeah.
But we're all going to share a cigar together and rate it using the rating scale. Together with our drinks and our cigars.
Yeah. So but then I'll probably have the patio furniture back outside and stuff, so we'll see.
There you go. Perfect.
Yeah.
So there's some good things coming up in the pipeline. But once again, I want to get the MG live stream D&D game in Vegas, either in Vegas or Reno.
Mm-hmm.
No, I know RageCon is in Reno in June.
Okay.
Late June. I think it's late June or early July. I'm not sure if we're doing that or something in Vegas itself. Either or, that's fine. We'll figure it out. But we'll probably do the convention. My guess is, my plan is to do a Wednesday through a Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Wednesday will just be like a meet and greet with everybody. Thursday, either that Thursday or that Friday, will be the actual live stream D&D game with all of us, with Rollo being the DM.
Okay.
And then Saturday, if we're up for it, having a meetup with people who want to hang out with us in either Reno or Vegas, just like a couple hours at a cigar bar.
Mm-hmm.
And do that.
Okay.
No spurgs or tards allowed. If you are, we'll immediately eject you. So just saying. Come correct. But we'll keep you posted on that. But the live stream D&D game is just for the players themselves, not anyone else. So keep it a tight little unit.
Yeah.
It's like what Clint Eastwood said in Kelly's Heroes. I want to keep this a tight little unit. I want any friends or friends of friends.
Yeah.
That's not possible.
Exactly.
Yeah. So. We're not even letting Rollo bring his e-thoughts.
No, unless he's actually DMing a game under the MG brand. That's the only way we're doing that. No, Blake, you're not invited. You're not invited to the D&D game. You're invited to the meetup as far as like the cigar bar drinking hangout, sure.
Mhm.
That'll be fine, and we'll let you know the location. That'll be all done, either via email or Telegram or something, so we don't have retards show up. But to the actual live stream D&D game, no, Blake. Alas, you are not.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's just our D&D group plus TJ.
Mhm.
Well, I say D&D group plus TJ because you bailed on us.
Yeah.
I'm
you
calling
bailed
you
on
out.
both games.
You bailed on both games, and you are done your training, your dog training. You can't still be dog training on Wednesdays.
And I mean, Vince bought you and gave you a player's handbook.
It's so bad. He doesn't read it. He doesn't want to read it so badly that he's decided to quit instead of reading it.
Guys, it's not the same as doing it in real life.
No, I know. I prefer everyone being around the table.
That and you can ask Rollo because I told him this. One of the guitarists for Heart lives in my community, and he does performances on Wednesday nights at a local bookstore. So I kind of go there to just occasionally when I get the chance to enjoy that stuff. But yeah, the puppy training was there, but now there was that. But at the same time, I really enjoy playing games in person. This is why
I totally understand. You're better in person playing the game anyway.
Yeah. Now, are we talking the classic lineup of Heart from the 70s or one of the
original guitar? No, the original guitarist.
The original guitarist from Heart.
Yeah.
That is really cool.
Yeah, he lives in my area. So I was at a concert where he was sitting there talking about stuff, and yeah, it was kind of crazy.
Yeah, the original guitarist, drummer, and bass player all can. Yes, it was Ann and Nancy Wilson's thing. Absolutely. Those guys in that original lineup contributed a lot to the sound of Heart and the music of Heart, for which I don't think they ever got their just credit. So I'm just putting that out there for my musical opinion.
Fair enough. And on that note, it's the hour mark. I like to keep these about an hour. Fundamentally, the watch time comes from the live stream. Everyone in the chat, I appreciate everyone in the chat. I do. I know I can sometimes come off as an arrogant dick. I am sometimes. That's fine. But I do appreciate everyone in the chat. I do like that we do have people watching. We have a decent following, a very consistent decent following. But the watch time later, the average watch time for most of our shows is about 20 minutes. So I guarantee you, no one who's watching later has got this far. So fuck you guys. They haven't gotten this far. So I appreciate everyone who's here. So
yeah,
but
Aaron only makes 5 minutes of that.
He's got about 6 minutes in his rewatch time. So I'm happy that we even get that much. I mean, that's the average. I'm sure it's a little higher. It's a bell curve. So, but we're gonna call it a night. We have to keep these about an hour, just because everyone has ADHD, and I'm tired, and no doubt you gentlemen are as well. And TJ, as usual, can you take us out?
All right, out you go.
Get out, get out, see?
All right, guys, you know the drill. Keep the fires burning, keep the wine flowing, keep the lead shooting down range, keep the fires burning. I think I didn't say that.
Keep the fires burning, yeah.
Yeah.
You can burn it twice.
No.
Yeah, burn it twice. Hey, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing again.
That's right.
Don't take any wooden nickels. Don't drink all the rum like Aaron Clary. And tune into next week's episode.
Exactly.
Yeah, and if you guys break down and buy this from Warlord, especially if you buy it from their website, not just on Amazon, make sure you tell the guys there that you did it because you watched us talking about it. Not that they're going to give us anything, but maybe if we contact them at some point in the future to have someone there come on to
that'd be great. I would love that
to talk. The fact that we've talked about them before and talked well about them before might help grease the wheel a little bit. So
that's fantastic. Cool. All right. On that note, we'll see you next Wednesday for our general discussion. Once again, we're going to keep it about the hour mark, so it's not too late for everyone. Until then, enjoy your weekends and enjoy the beginning of your next week, and we'll see you next Wednesday. Aaron Clary's gay.